Welcome back to Forgotten Empires, Bedtime History. Before you get comfortable, tonight we search for a place that may never have existed at all. A city of gold and bronze, of impossible wealth and forbidden knowledge. A civilization that rose higher than any other and vanished beneath the waves in a single day and night. Tonight's story is Atlantis. If you enjoy falling asleep to the greatest stories ever told, hit subscribe and leave a like. New stories drop every 3 to 4 days. Tell us in the comments, what city are you writing from tonight? We love knowing where in the world our listeners are drifting off to sleep. Now, close your eyes, take a slow breath, and let the ocean carry you down to the lost city. Atlantis, the civilization that vanished in a day. Close your eyes. Imagine standing on the deck of a ship, somewhere beyond the Pillars of Hercules, beyond the edge of the known world. The sea is calm tonight, dark water stretching in every direction, stars scattered across the sky like silver dust, and somewhere below you, far beneath the waves, beneath centuries of sand and silence, lies a city, or so the story goes. A city greater than any that came after, wealthier than Egypt, wiser than Greece, more powerful than Rome would ever be. A city that the gods themselves destroyed in a single day and night. This is the story of Atlantis, the greatest mystery ever told. Part 1. The man who told the story. Every legend begins somewhere, and the legend of Atlantis begins with one man, not a sailor, not an explorer, a philosopher. His name was Plato. He lived in Athens, in the 4th century before Christ. He was a student of Socrates, the teacher of Aristotle, and one of the most influential thinkers who ever lived. Around the year 360 BC, Plato wrote 2 dialogues, conversations between philosophers, called the Timaeus and the Critias. And in these dialogues, almost in passing, he told a story that would haunt human imagination for the next 2,000 years. The story, Plato said, was true. It had been passed down through generations. From the great Athenian lawmaker Solon, who heard it from priests in Egypt, who had preserved it in their temple records for 9,000 years. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, there was once an island, larger than Libya and Asia combined, and on this island flourished the greatest civilization the world had ever known. Atlantis. Part 2. The Kingdom of Poseidon. According to Plato, Atlantis was no ordinary kingdom. It was founded by a god. When the gods divided the world among themselves, Poseidon, god of the sea, received the great island, and on that island lived a mortal woman named Cleito. Poseidon fell in love with her, and to protect her, he shaped the very land itself. He carved the mountain where she lived into concentric rings, alternating circles of land and water. 2 of land, 3 of water, perfectly round, as if drawn with a divine compass. No human could cross these rings, for ships and sailing were not yet known. At the center of this ringed island, Poseidon and Cleito had 10 children, 5 pairs of twin sons, and the eldest was named Atlas, not the Titan who held up the sky, another Atlas, the first king of Atlantis. From him, the island took its name, and the ocean around it too, the Atlantic. Part 3. The wealthiest city on Earth. Over the generations, the descendants of Atlas built something extraordinary. They bridged the rings of water. They dug a great canal to the sea. They built harbors and docks and walls. And what walls they were! The outermost wall was covered in brass. The middle wall gleamed with tin, and the innermost wall, surrounding the sacred citadel itself, flashed with the red light of orichalcum, a mysterious metal, more precious than anything except gold. A metal we cannot identify today, whose secret died with Atlantis itself. At the very center of the city stood the Temple of Poseidon, a stadium in length, its exterior covered entirely in silver, its pinnacles in gold. Inside, the ceiling was ivory, adorned with gold and orichalcum, and there stood a statue of the god himself, Poseidon in his chariot, driving 6 winged horses, so tall that his head touched the ceiling, surrounded by 100 sea nymphs riding dolphins, all of it solid gold. The island itself was a paradise, 2 harvests every year, one watered by winter rains, one by irrigation from canals, forests of every kind of timber, herds of animals, including elephants, every fruit and grain and herb the earth could offer, hot springs and cold springs, baths for kings and baths for citizens, groves of trees planted for the gods, and a racetrack for horses that circled an entire ring of the city. The Atlanteans had everything: wealth beyond measure, power beyond challenge, knowledge beyond their time, and for generations, they were good. Part 4. The Fall. This is the part of the story that Plato insisted mattered most. For many generations, the Atlanteans obeyed the laws of their divine ancestor. They bore their wealth lightly. They valued virtue above gold. They saw their riches as tools, not treasures. But the divine blood, generation by generation, grew thin. The human nature took over, and the Atlanteans changed. They became greedy, proud, hungry for power. The wealth they had once carried lightly began to carry them, and their eyes turned outward, toward conquest. 9,000 years before Plato's time, the story says, Atlantis moved to enslave the world. Its armies poured out of the Western Ocean. They conquered North Africa as far as Egypt. They conquered Europe as far as Italy. Nothing could stand against them, except one city, a small, proud city that would one day be called Athens. The ancient Athenians stood alone against the might of Atlantis, and somehow, against all odds, they won. They threw back the invaders. They freed the conquered lands. They saved the world from slavery. And then, the gods delivered their judgment. Zeus, king of the gods, looked upon Atlantis, upon what greed had done to the noblest civilization on earth, and he decided to punish them. Plato describes what happened next in a single, devastating passage. There occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. Gone. The temples of silver and gold, the walls of brass and orichalcum, the harbors and the gardens and the racetrack for horses, the greatest civilization the world had ever known, erased in 24 hours, as if it had never existed at all. Part 5. But was it real? And now we come to the question that has haunted scholars, explorers, dreamers, and madmen for over 2,000 years. Was Atlantis real? Here is what we know for certain. Plato is the only ancient source. No Egyptian record of Atlantis has ever been found. No other Greek writer mentions it independently. Everything, every book, every theory, every expedition traces back to those 2 dialogues. Even Plato's own student, Aristotle, reportedly believed the story was invention, a philosophical fable, created to illustrate a lesson. What happens when a civilization becomes corrupted by power and greed? The perfect society, destroyed by its own success. And it is worth noting that Plato's story conveniently made his own city, Athens, the hero of the tale. But, and there is always a but, some elements of the story are strangely specific. The concentric rings of land and water, the red metal orichalcum, the precise measurements of the city, the elephants. Why would a philosopher inventing a fable include such details? And there is something else. Something that happened about 900 years before Plato was born. Something that might be the seed of truth at the heart of the legend. Part 6. The island that really exploded. In the middle of the Aegean Sea, between Greece and Crete, lies a small circular group of islands called Santorini. Today, it is famous for white houses and blue domes and spectacular sunsets. But the islands themselves are the rim of a gigantic volcanic crater. And around the year 1600 BC, that volcano erupted. It was one of the largest volcanic events in human history, 4 times more powerful than Krakatoa. The center of the island simply vanished, blown into the sky or collapsed into the sea. Tsunamis over 100 feet tall radiated across the eastern Mediterranean. Ash darkened the sky for weeks, and on the nearby island of Crete, the most advanced civilization in Europe suffered a blow from which it would never recover. They were called the Minoans, and they were extraordinary. While most of Europe lived in huts, the Minoans built palaces of multiple stories with running water and flushing toilets and walls covered in exquisite frescoes. They were master sailors, master traders. Their ships connected Egypt, Greece, and the Levant. Their capital at Knossos had a palace so vast and complex, it may have inspired the legend of the labyrinth. They worshipped the bull. They painted dolphins on their walls. Their women held high status. Their cities had no defensive walls because their navy made them untouchable. A wealthy island civilization, master of the seas, advanced beyond all neighbors, destroyed by a cataclysm from the sea. Sound familiar? Many historians believe that garbled memories of the Minoan catastrophe, passed down through 1,000 years of Egyptian records and Greek retellings, became the seed of Plato's Atlantis. The dates don't match. Plato says 9,000 years, the eruption was 900. But some scholars suggest a translation error, a slipped decimal in the ancient sources, 9,000 instead of 900. If that single error occurred, then the timeline aligns almost perfectly. Part 7. The search that never ends. But of course, that has never stopped the searching. Since Plato's time, Atlantis has been found hundreds of times, in the Mediterranean, in the Caribbean, off the coast of Spain, in the Sahara Desert, where a strange circular geological formation called the Eye of the Sahara matches Plato's rings with eerie precision, in Antarctica, in Indonesia, in the Bahamas, where underwater stone formations called the Bimini Road look almost man-made. Every few years, a new expedition, a new theory, a new documentary. Sonar images of strange shapes on the seafloor, underwater structures that might be walls or might be natural rock. The search never ends, because deep down, we want it to be real. Part 8. Why we still dream of Atlantis. And that, perhaps, is the real mystery. Not where Atlantis is, but why we can't let it go. 2,400 years after Plato wrote his dialogues, Atlantis appears in movies and video games, in comic books and cartoons, in the names of hotels and space shuttles. Why? Perhaps because Atlantis is a mirror. Every age finds in it what it needs to find. The Renaissance saw a lost golden age of wisdom. The Victorians saw a vanished empire, like their own. The modern age sees a warning about civilizations that grow too powerful, too greedy, too certain of their own permanence. Atlantis is the story we tell ourselves, about what happens when success becomes arrogance, when wealth becomes greed, when a civilization forgets that nothing lasts forever. Plato's lesson was never about geography. It was about the human soul. The Atlanteans fell, not when the ocean took their city, but long before, when they stopped being grateful, when they started wanting more than everything. The waves only finished what greed had begun. Epilogue: the city beneath the waves. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let yourself believe, just for a moment, that somewhere out there, beneath the dark Atlantic, beneath the sand and the silence and the slow rain of centuries, the towers still stand. The streets of the ringed city where chariots once raced, the temple of Poseidon with its ivory ceiling, the gardens and the harbors and the walls that flashed with the red light of orichalcum, sleeping, waiting, remembering. Whether Atlantis was real, or only a dream in the mind of an old philosopher, it has achieved something remarkable. It has outlived every civilization that laughed at it. The empires of Plato's day are dust. Their palaces are ruins. Their names are footnotes. But Atlantis, the city that may never have existed, is immortal. Sleep now. Let the ocean rock you gently. Imagine the deep blue silence, the soft glow of sunlight filtering down through the water, the slow dance of seaweed between marble columns, a city at rest, a story at rest. And now, you. Good night. And remember, every empire believed it would last forever. None of them did, but some of them became legends. Good night.